The afternoon sun beat down on the Riverside Shopping Center parking lot, casting long shadows across the pavement. It was one of those ordinary Tuesday afternoons where nothing special was supposed to happen. The kind of day where people ran their errands, grabbed their groceries, and went about their business without a second thought. 16-year-old Tyler sat on the metal bench near the main entrance, his backpack beside him and his phone in his hand. He'd been there for about 40 minutes, waiting patiently like his mom had asked. She had an important meeting in the office, building across the street, and told him to wait right there. She'd be done soon, she promised. Tyler didn't mind. He had his earbuds in, listening to music, scrolling through social media, and working on some homework problems he'd saved on his phone. His National Honor Society jacket hung open in the warm weather, and his school ID dangled from a lanyard around his neck. He looked exactly like what he was, a high school student killing time while waiting for a ride home. But to one particular woman exiting the grocery store, he looked like something else entirely. Patricia had just finished her shopping, 2 bags of organic produce and specialty items in her cart. She noticed Tyler almost immediately. Her eyes lingered on him as she walked past, heading toward her silver SUV parked 3 rows away. Something about him bothered her, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what. Or maybe she could, but didn't want to admit it to herself. She loaded her groceries into the trunk but kept glancing back at the bench. The teen was still there, still on his phone. Patricia checked her watch. She'd been in the store for 30 minutes, and she was certain he'd been sitting there when she went in. What was he doing? Why was he just sitting there? Young people these days were always up to something. Patricia pushed her cart to the return area, but instead of getting in her car and leaving, she found herself walking back toward the entrance. Her heels clicked on the pavement as she approached the bench where Tyler sat, completely absorbed in his phone. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through his music. Tyler pulled out one earbud and looked up, a polite smile on his face. "Yes, ma'am." "What are you doing here?" Patricia asked, crossing her arms over her chest. Tyler blinked, slightly confused by the question. "I'm waiting for my mom. She's at a meeting across the street." "You've been sitting here for quite a while," Patricia said, her tone suggesting this was somehow suspicious. "I saw you when I went into the store and you're still here." "Yeah, my mom's meeting is running a bit long," Tyler explained, keeping his voice respectful. His mother had taught him well. Always be polite, always stay calm, never give anyone a reason to escalate. "She should be done any minute now." Patricia pursed her lips, clearly unsatisfied with this explanation. "Well, it makes people uncomfortable when someone just sits around like this. Maybe you should wait somewhere else." Tyler felt a familiar tightness in his chest. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Last summer, it was at the community pool. Before that, at the public library. His mom always told him it wasn't his fault, that some people made assumptions they shouldn't make. But knowing that didn't make it any easier when it happened. "This is a public bench, ma'am," Tyler said quietly. "I'm not bothering anyone. I'm just waiting for my mom." "Don't take that tone with me," Patricia snapped, though Tyler's voice had been nothing but respectful. "I'm just trying to keep this area safe for everyone." A few other shoppers had started to notice the conversation. A woman with 2 small children paused near her car, watching. An elderly man slowed his walk, concern crossing his face. "I understand," Tyler said, trying to de-escalate. "But I'm really just waiting for my mom. She told me to wait here, so that's what I'm doing." Patricia shook her head, frustration evident on her face. "If you don't leave, I'm going to have to call the police. You're loitering." Tyler's heart sank. He knew that arguing would only make things worse, but he also knew he hadn't done anything wrong. More importantly, his mom had specifically told him to wait on this bench. If he left and she couldn't find him, she'd worry. "Ma'am, I'm not loitering. I'm waiting for my mom and she'll be here soon. I promise I'm not causing any trouble." "That's what they all say," Patricia muttered, pulling out her phone. The woman with the 2 children stepped closer. "Excuse me, but is there a problem? That young man has just been sitting there. I've been here for 20 minutes and he hasn't moved or bothered anyone." Patricia whipped around. "I don't recall asking for your opinion. I'm just trying to make sure this shopping center is safe." "Safe from what?" "A kid doing homework on his phone? the woman asked, incredulity in her voice. But Patricia had already made up her mind. She dialed 911, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. Tyler felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. He was tired of being seen as a threat when he was just trying to live his life. Tired of having to prove he belonged in public spaces. Tired of being 16 years old and having to handle situations that would make most adults anxious. He pulled out his own phone and sent a quick text to his mom. "Someone called the cops on me again. I'm at the bench where you left me." Patricia spoke into her phone, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Yes, I'm at Riverside Shopping Center, and there's a suspicious individual who's been loitering here for over an hour. He's refusing to leave and I feel threatened. Please send someone quickly." Tyler almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Threatened? He was sitting down wearing his school jacket doing homework. But he'd learned that other people's fear didn't have to make sense. It just had to exist. The woman who'd spoken up earlier pulled out her own phone and started recording. "This is ridiculous," she said to no one in particular. "This kid is literally just sitting there." Other shoppers had gathered now, forming a small crowd. Some looked uncomfortable, others angry. A few were recording on their phones too. In today's world, everyone knew that video evidence mattered. "You should be ashamed of yourself," an older man said to Patricia. "That boy hasn't done a thing wrong." Patricia's face flushed red. "I have every right to feel safe. If you all want to take his side, that's your problem. I know what I saw." "What did you see?" the woman with children asked. "Because all I see is a teenager waiting for his mother." Tyler wanted to tell them all to stop, that it was okay, that he was used to this, but his throat felt tight and he didn't trust his voice not to shake. So he sat there, hands folded in his lap, trying to look as non-threatening as possible while his heart hammered in his chest. In the distance, a siren wailed, growing louder with each passing second. Tyler took a deep breath and prepared himself for what came next. He'd been through this before. Stay calm, be respectful, keep your hands visible, answer their questions clearly, don't make any sudden movements, don't show anger, even if you feel it burning inside you. His phone buzzed with a response from his mom. "On my way. 2 minutes. Don't move." Tyler looked up at the bright blue sky, wondering how such a beautiful afternoon had turned into this. The siren grew closer, and Patricia stood with her arms crossed, a look of vindication on her face. The shopping center's ordinary Tuesday afternoon was about to become anything but ordinary. The police cruiser pulled into the parking lot with its lights flashing, but no siren. Officer David Richardson had been on the force for nearly 15 years, and his partner, Officer Michelle Torres, had 8 years under her belt. They'd responded to countless calls at this shopping center over the years. Shoplifting, fender benders, the occasional argument over parking spaces. But a suspicious person call always required careful attention. David stepped out of the vehicle first, his eyes scanning the scene. A small crowd had gathered near the entrance. A well-dressed woman stood apart from them, waving frantically to get his attention. Several people were holding up their phones, recording. That was never a good sign. These days, every interaction could end up online within minutes. "Officers, thank goodness you're here." Patricia rushed toward them, her voice breathless with relief and something else. Righteousness, maybe. "That young man over there has been loitering for over an hour. I asked him to leave multiple times and he refused. I don't feel safe." Michelle followed David's gaze to the bench where Tyler sat, his hands now resting on his knees, his posture careful and deliberate. She noticed the school jacket immediately. The backpack beside him looked like every other high school student's bag she'd ever seen, covered in pins and patches. "Ma'am, we'll handle this," David said to Patricia, his tone professional but not warm. Something about the situation already felt off to him. "Please step back and let us assess." The two officers approached Tyler, and David couldn't help but notice how the kid's shoulders tensed even though his face remained calm. He'd seen that look before, the expression of someone trying very hard to appear non-threatening. "Good afternoon," David said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I'm Officer Richardson. This is Officer Torres. We got a call about someone loitering. Can you tell me what you're doing here?" Tyler looked up at them, and Michelle saw he couldn't be more than 16 or 17. There was no defiance in his eyes, just exhaustion mixed with something that looked like resignation. "I'm waiting for my mom, sir," Tyler said clearly. She had a meeting in the office building across the street. "She told me to wait here for her, and that's what I'm doing. She texted me a few minutes ago saying she's on her way." "How long have you been sitting here?" Michelle asked, her voice gentler than her partner's. "About 45 minutes, maybe 50, Tyler answered. "The meeting ran longer than expected." David nodded slowly. "Do you have any identification on you?" "Yes, sir. My school ID. It's on the lanyard around my neck." "Can I reach for it?" The fact that the kid asked permission before moving struck both officers. Michelle glanced at David, and she could tell he was thinking the same thing. This wasn't someone looking for trouble. "Go ahead." Slowly, David said. Tyler carefully lifted the lanyard, showing them his school ID from Riverside High. His photo smiled back at them, the same face but looking more carefree. Below his picture, it listed him as a junior and showed a National Honor Society designation. "Riverside High, that's a good school," Michelle said. "My nephew goes there." "Yes, ma'am. I like it there." David was about to ask another question when he heard the distinct sound of a vehicle moving fast through the parking lot. Not recklessly fast, but with purpose. He turned to see a black SUV with government plates swinging into a spot near the entrance. The kind of vehicle that belonged to someone important? The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out with the kind of presence that commanded immediate attention. She was dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, her posture radiating authority. But what made David's stomach drop was what he saw clipped to her belt, FBI credentials clearly visible. The woman's eyes swept across the scene, taking in everything at once. The officers, her son on the bench, the crowd of onlookers, Patricia standing to the side. Her expression shifted from concern to controlled anger in the space of a heartbeat. "That's my son," she said, her voice cutting through every other sound in the parking lot. It wasn't loud, but everyone heard it clearly. "And I'm Director Angela Mitchell, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Someone want to tell me exactly what's happening here?" David felt his throat go dry. Director Mitchell. He recognized the name immediately. She'd been appointed 18 months ago, the first African-American woman to hold the position. Her face had been in every law enforcement briefing, every news broadcast. And he'd just been questioning her son based on a loitering call. Michelle straightened instinctively, her training kicking in even as her mind raced. This was bad. This was really, really bad. Patricia's face had gone pale. The confident, righteous expression she'd worn since calling 911 had completely disappeared, replaced by something close to panic. Director Mitchell walked toward them with measured steps, each one deliberate. She pulled out her credentials properly, showing them to both officers even though David was certain they'd already recognized her. "Director Mitchell," David said, finding his voice. "I'm Officer Richardson. We responded to a call about my 16-year-old son sitting on a public bench waiting for his mother." Director Mitchell finished, her tone ice cold. "Yes, I'm aware. Tyler, are you all right?" "I'm fine, Mom," Tyler said quietly, though his relief at seeing her was obvious. Director Mitchell placed a hand on her son's shoulder, a gesture that was both protective and comforting, before turning her full attention back to the officers. "Let me be very clear," she said, her voice still controlled but carrying an edge that made everyone listening understand. This was not a woman to be trifled with. My son is an honor student. He volunteers as a tutor at the community center every Thursday. He's never been in trouble in his life. He was sitting on this bench because I, his mother, told him to wait here while I finished a meeting. Now, officers, I want to know why you're here." Michelle spoke up, trying to salvage the situation. "Ma'am, we received a 911 call from that woman over there. She reported someone loitering and refusing to leave when asked." Director Mitchell's gaze shifted to Patricia, who looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. The crowd had grown larger now, and the number of phones recording had multiplied. "This was going to be everywhere by tonight, is that so?" Director Mitchell said, walking slowly toward Patricia. "You called the police on a teenage boy for sitting on a bench?" Patricia stammered, her earlier confidence completely shattered. I thought he'd been there for so long, and I just wanted to make sure everything was safe." "I didn't know." "Didn't know what?" Director Mitchell interrupted, her tone sharp. "Didn't know he had a mother. Didn't know he had a right to exist in a public space?" "What exactly did you think was happening here?" "I was just concerned. Patricia tried to explain, her voice getting higher. There have been problems in this area before, and I thought, he looked like what? Director Mitchell asked, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. Please finish that sentence. He looked like what? Patricia's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out, because there was no way to finish that sentence that wouldn't expose exactly what had motivated her call. The crowd around them murmured, and several people shook their heads in disgust. That's what I thought, Director Mitchell said, turning back to the officers. This is the third time in 2 years that someone has called the police on my son for simply existing in a public space. Third time, he was at the library studying. He was at the community pool, and now he's sitting on a bench waiting for his mother. Tell me, officers, what crime has my son committed? David felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Ma'am, with all due respect, we were just responding to a call. We have to investigate every report we receive. I understand that, Director Mitchell said, her tone softening slightly toward the officers. You're doing your job. But that woman weaponized your badge. She used the police as a tool to harass a child who was doing nothing wrong. And that, Officer Richardson, is a serious problem. A marked supervisor's vehicle pulled into the lot and Sergeant Frank Cooper emerged, clearly responding to the escalating situation. He took one look at Director Mitchell's credentials and his expression shifted to one of professional concern, mixed with embarrassment. Director Mitchell, he said, approaching with his hand extended. I'm Sergeant Cooper. I apologize for this situation. Director Mitchell shook his hand firmly. Sergeant, your officers here handled themselves professionally once they arrived. But we need to talk about why they had to come here in the first place. Tyler remained on the bench, watching his mother handle the situation with the skill and authority she'd earned through years of service. He'd seen her in action before, but never quite like this. Never defending him. Part of him felt pride. Another part felt sadness that it had to happen at all. The woman who'd first spoken up for Tyler stepped forward from the crowd. Officers, for what it's worth, I watched the whole thing. That young man did absolutely nothing wrong. Nothing. He was just sitting there. Several other voices chimed in agreement. The tide of public opinion was clear, and it was not in Patricia's favor. Director Mitchell looked at her son one more time. Tyler, wait in the car, please. As Tyler gathered his things, grateful to escape the spotlight, his mother turned her attention fully to addressing what happened next. Tyler walked toward his mother's SUV, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Behind him, he could hear the murmur of voices, the tension thick in the air. He climbed into the passenger seat and closed the door, but he could still see everything through the windshield. His mom stood there like a force of nature, and for a moment he felt a strange mix of emotions. Gratitude, yes, but also guilt that she had to fight battles like this because of him. Back at the scene, Director Mitchell turned to face the small crowd that had gathered. More people had stopped now, drawn by the commotion. She'd spent her entire career in service of justice, working her way up through the bureau with dedication and skill. She'd investigated organized crime, terrorism, corruption. She'd testified before Congress. But nothing had prepared her for the unique pain of watching her own son be treated like a criminal for existing. Sergeant Cooper, she said, her voice steady and professional, I'd like to have a word with you and your officers privately. The sergeant nodded quickly. Of course, Director. Officers Richardson and Torres, please join us over here. The four of them moved away from the crowd toward the supervisor's vehicle. Patricia remained where she was, looking like she desperately wanted to disappear, but was frozen to the spot. The woman who'd defended Tyler stayed nearby, her phone still recording, making sure everything was documented. Let me be clear about something, Director Mitchell began once they had some privacy. I'm not here to get anyone fired. Your officers responded professionally to a call. They were respectful to my son, and I appreciate that. Officer Richardson, Officer Torres, you both handled yourselves well. David felt some of the tension leave his shoulders, but he knew there was a but coming. However, Director Mitchell continued, and there it was. This situation represents a much larger problem that we need to address. This is the third time my son has had the police called on him for doing absolutely nothing wrong. Third time, he was studying at the library. Someone said he looked suspicious. He was swimming at the public pool. Someone said he didn't belong there. And now this. He's 16 years old and he's already learned that he can't move through the world the same way other kids do. Sergeant Cooper shifted uncomfortably. Director, I understand your frustration. Do you? Director Mitchell interrupted, her voice sharper now. Do you understand what it's like to tell your child that he has to be twice as careful, twice as polite, twice as aware of how he's perceived just to stay safe? Do you know what it's like to get a text from your son saying, "Someone called the cops on me again," and feel your heart stop? Michelle Torres spoke up quietly. No, ma'am. I can't imagine. Director Mitchell's expression softened slightly. She could see that these officers genuinely cared. That mattered. I know you can't control who calls 911 or why, but what we can control is how we respond to these calls. When someone reports a suspicious person who's literally just sitting on a bench, reading or waiting, doing nothing illegal, there has to be a better way to handle it. You're right, Sergeant Cooper said, and he meant it. We need better training on recognizing bias-motivated calls. We need our dispatchers asking more detailed questions before sending units out. Yes, you do, Director Mitchell agreed. Because every time this happens, it sends a message to my son that he doesn't belong, that he's guilty until proven innocent. And frankly, Sergeant, it wastes your resources. How many real emergencies could your officers be responding to instead of this? David nodded. She's right. We could have been doing actual police work. I want to see changes, Director Mitchell said firmly. I want to see policy changes about how these calls are handled. I want dispatchers trained to recognize when someone is weaponizing 911 against people who are just living their lives. And I want my son to be able to sit on a bench without fear. You'll have my full cooperation, Sergeant Cooper promised. I'll personally bring this to the chief and to the training division. Director Mitchell studied him for a moment, then nodded. She believed him. I'm going to hold you to that. And for the record, this conversation will be documented. Not as a threat, but because accountability matters. Understood, the sergeant replied. Director Mitchell then turned her attention back toward Patricia, who was still standing near the entrance looking utterly miserable. Several people from the crowd were speaking to her, and not kindly. One man was shaking his head in disgust. The woman with the 2 children was telling her exactly what she thought of her actions. Director Mitchell walked back toward the main area, the 3 officers following at a respectful distance. Patricia saw her coming and visibly flinched. I'm sorry, Patricia blurted out before Director Mitchell could say anything. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean... I wasn't trying to... What weren't you trying to do? Director Mitchell asked, stopping a few feet away. Weren't trying to harass a child? Weren't trying to use the police as your personal security force? Weren't trying to make my son feel like he's not welcome in a public space? I thought... Patricia's voice cracked. I made a mistake. You didn't make a mistake, Director Mitchell said, her voice cold and precise. Mistakes are accidental. You made a choice. You looked at my son, made an assumption based on nothing but how he looks, and decided he was a threat. Then you called 911 and lied, saying you felt threatened when he was literally sitting still on a bench. The crowd around them had grown silent, everyone listening to the exchange. This was the moment that would define everything that came after. You're right, Patricia said, tears starting to stream down her face. You're absolutely right. I saw him and I made assumptions. Terrible assumptions. I don't even know what I thought. Just that he didn't belong here, and that's so wrong. I'm ashamed of myself. Director Mitchell studied her for a long moment. Part of her wanted to unleash all the anger and frustration she felt. But another part, the part that had spent a career understanding human behavior, recognized something genuine in Patricia's distress. Not pity for herself, but actual shame. You should be ashamed, Director Mitchell said quietly, because you could have ruined my son's life today. Do you understand that? If those officers had been less professional, if the situation had escalated, if Tyler had reacted out of fear or frustration, this could have ended very differently. Young black men have died for less. Patricia's sobs came harder now. I know, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Your apology doesn't undo the trauma you caused, Director Mitchell continued. My son shouldn't have to accept your apology or make you feel better about your choices. But I truly hope that you learn from this, that you examine why you made the assumptions you made, that you do better. The woman who'd been defending Tyler stepped forward. I recorded everything, the whole interaction. It's already on social media, and people are sharing it everywhere. This isn't going away. Patricia's face went even paler. Oh God, my job, my family, maybe that's what it takes, the woman said, her voice hard. Maybe facing consequences is the only way some people learn. Officer Torres approached Patricia with a notebook. "Ma'am, I need to inform you that filing a false police report is a crime. Based on what we've observed and what witnesses have stated, there was no legitimate cause for your 911 call." "Are you arresting me?" Patricia asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Not at this time," Michelle said. "But this incident will be documented in our report. The shopping center management has also been notified and will be making their own decisions about your access to this property." As if on cue, a man in a suit emerged from the shopping center office. He approached the group with a grim expression. "I'm Raymond Chen, the property manager here. Ma'am, based on what I've witnessed and what's been reported to me, you're no longer welcome on this property. You're banned from this shopping center effective immediately. If you return, you'll be trespassing." Patricia looked like she might collapse. Her perfect afternoon of grocery shopping had turned into a nightmare of her own making. And the reality of consequences was hitting her hard. Director Mitchell watched it all unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that justice was being served, but sadness that it had to come to this at all. She glanced back at her SUV where Tyler sat watching through the windshield. He'd handled himself with such grace and maturity, but he shouldn't have had to. A local news van pulled into the parking lot, camera crew already assembling. The story was spreading fast, and Director Mitchell knew she'd need to make a statement. This was bigger than just one incident now. It was a teachable moment, a chance to spark real conversation about bias and how it manifests in everyday life. She pulled out her phone and texted Tyler, "You okay, sweetheart?" His response came quickly. "Yeah, tired. Can we go home?" Director Mitchell's heart ached. Her son was tired. Tired at 16. Tired of proving he had a right to exist in peace. "Soon," she typed back. "I have to talk to the media. Then we'll go get ice cream and talk about all of this." She put her phone away and straightened her jacket, preparing to face the cameras and tell the world what had happened here today. The news reporter, a young woman named Kelly Bradford from Channel 7, approached Director Mitchell with her microphone ready. Her cameraman positioned himself to capture the shopping center entrance in the background. Kelly had been covering local news for 3 years, but she knew this story was different. This was national news material. "Director Mitchell, thank you for speaking with us," Kelly began, her voice professional but sympathetic. "Can you tell us what happened here today?" Director Mitchell took a breath, composing herself. She'd given thousands of statements in her career, but this one was personal in a way nothing else had ever been. "My 16-year-old son was sitting on that bench waiting for me to finish a work meeting. He was doing homework on his phone. He wasn't bothering anyone. He wasn't breaking any laws. He was simply existing in a public space." She paused, letting that sink in. "A woman decided he looked suspicious and called 911. When the police arrived, they found exactly what I just described, a teenage honor student waiting for his mother." "How did you feel when you got your son's text message?" Kelly asked. Director Mitchell's professional mask cracked slightly, and for a moment the pain showed through. "Terrified, angry, heartbroken. This is the 3rd time in 2 years this has happened to him, and I know my son is one of the lucky ones. I arrived in time. The officers were professional, but we all know that's not always how these situations end." Behind the camera, the crowd that had witnessed everything nodded in agreement. Several people wiped their eyes. "What do you think needs to change?" Kelly continued. "Everything," Director Mitchell said firmly. "We need to examine our biases. We need to stop treating people of color, especially young black men, as threats by default. We need 911 dispatchers trained to recognize bias-motivated calls. We need consequences for people who weaponize police against innocent individuals. And we need to have honest, uncomfortable conversations about why this keeps happening." The interview lasted another 5 minutes, with Director Mitchell speaking clearly and passionately about the need for change. When it was over, several other media outlets were waiting for their turn. The story was already trending on social media, the video footage from witnesses spreading rapidly across platforms. While his mother handled the media, Tyler sat in the SUV scrolling through his phone. His notifications were exploding. Friends from school texting him. People he barely knew sending messages of support. The video of the confrontation had already been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. He read some of the comments. "This breaks my heart. He's just a kid. Good for his mom for standing up. This happens way too often. We need to do better." But there were other comments too, ones that made his stomach turn. "Why didn't he just leave when asked? If he wasn't doing anything wrong, why didn't he cooperate? People have a right to feel safe. Tyler closed the app. He knew those comments would come. They always did. People who would find any excuse to justify what happened. Who would twist the narrative to make him the problem instead of the victim. His mom finally finished with the media and climbed into the driver's seat. She sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, not starting the car. Then she turned to look at her son. "Are you really okay?" she asked, and this time it was just Mom asking, not the director of the FBI. "I don't know," Tyler admitted. "I'm tired of this, Mom. I'm so tired of always having to prove I'm not dangerous. I was just sitting there." Director Mitchell reached over and squeezed his hand. "I know, baby, I know. And I'm sorry you have to deal with this. I'm sorry the world is like this. It's not your fault. I know, but I'm still sorry." She started the car. "Come on, let's get that ice cream I promised you." They drove to Tyler's favorite ice cream shop across town, a small family-owned place that made everything fresh. For 20 minutes, they sat in a corner booth and talked about everything except what had just happened. His mom asked about his upcoming chemistry test, about his friend Kevin's birthday party next weekend, about the college essay he was working on. Normal parent stuff, normal life stuff, but eventually they had to address it. "What happens now?" Tyler asked, stirring his mint chocolate chip until it became soup. "A lot of things," his mom said. "The police department will review their protocols. The media attention will force conversations that need to happen, and that woman Patricia will face her own consequences." Patricia was indeed facing consequences. By the time Director Mitchell and Tyler were eating ice cream, Patricia's world was crumbling. The video had been shared by major news outlets. Her name was trending on social media. Someone had identified her employer, and their office phone was ringing off the hook with angry calls. Patricia sat in her living room, her husband beside her, watching their world fall apart in real time. Her sister had called, disappointed and angry. Her mother had called, trying to understand how her daughter could do something like this. Her employer had called too. She was being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. "I don't know what I was thinking," Patricia said to her husband for the 100th time. "I saw him and I don't know. I thought he didn't belong there." "You need to figure out why you thought that," her husband said quietly. He was angry too, but mostly he was confused. This wasn't who he thought he'd married. Or maybe it was, and he'd never seen it before. Patricia's phone buzzed with another message. This one was from her employer's HR department. They were requiring her to complete diversity and implicit bias training before she could return to work. If she refused, her employment would be terminated. She accepted the requirement immediately. She had to. But more than that, she realized she needed it. The shame and embarrassment she felt was overwhelming. But beneath it, there was a growing understanding that she had a serious problem. She'd spent her whole life thinking of herself as a good person, a kind person. But good people didn't call the police on teenagers sitting on benches. Kind people didn't make assumptions based on skin color. Over the next few days, the story continued to grow. A hashtag emerged, "Let him sit," and people around the country started sharing their own stories of being profiled, harassed, and questioned for simply existing in public spaces. The stories were heartbreaking. A man detained for birdwatching in Central Park. A woman questioned for having a barbecue at a public lake. A college student stopped by campus security in his own dorm. The list went on and on. Director Mitchell appeared on several national news programs using her platform to speak about the issue. She was articulate and passionate, turning her personal pain into a catalyst for change. During one interview, she announced a new initiative she was launching. "I'm calling it Stop, Look, Listen," she explained to the host. Stop before you act on your assumptions. Look at the actual situation, not what you think you're seeing based on bias. Listen to people's explanations before jumping to conclusions. It's simple, but it could prevent so many of these incidents. The initiative gained immediate traction. Community organizations reached out wanting to partner with her. Schools asked if they could use the framework in their anti-bullying programs. Police departments inquired about incorporating it into their training. Tyler returned to school the following Monday, and it was strange. Everyone knew what had happened. Teachers looked at him with extra sympathy. Students approached him in the hallways, some offering support, others just staring. A few kids he didn't know well told him about times they'd experienced similar situations. His best friend Kevin walked with him to lunch. Man, your mom is a superhero. Did you see her on CNN last night? Tyler smiled slightly. Yeah, she's pretty amazing. How are you handling all this attention? It's weird, Tyler admitted. Part of me wishes it had never happened. But another part is glad that at least people are talking about it now. Maybe something good can come from it. In his English class, his teacher, Mrs. Roberts, asked if he'd be willing to speak to the class about his experience. Tyler wasn't sure at first, but then he agreed. He stood in front of his classmates and told them what it felt like to be seen as a threat for no reason. To have the police called on you when you're doing nothing wrong. To always have to be aware of how you're perceived. The classroom was silent when he finished. Then a girl named Hannah raised her hand. I never really understood before, she said quietly. I mean, I knew racism existed, but I didn't get how it felt. Thank you for helping me understand. Several other students nodded in agreement. It wasn't enough to fix everything, Tyler knew. But it was something. It was a start. Back at the police department, Sergeant Cooper was making good on his promise. He'd met with the chief and the training division multiple times. They were developing new protocols for handling suspicious person calls. Dispatchers would be trained to ask more detailed questions. Was the person actually doing anything illegal? What specifically made them suspicious? Were they threatening anyone or just existing in a space? Officers would receive additional training on recognizing bias-motivated calls and de-escalating situations where someone had clearly been profiled. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Officer Torres had volunteered to help develop the training program. The incident had affected her deeply. She had a young nephew, and seeing Tyler sitting on that bench had made her think about what kind of world he was growing up in. Patricia, meanwhile, had started attending meetings at a local organization that worked on racial justice issues. She was the only white woman in most of the rooms she entered, and that discomfort was intentional. She needed to listen. She needed to learn. She needed to confront the biases she'd carried without examination for so long. It wasn't comfortable. Some people at the meetings were angry with her, and they had every right to be, but others were willing to help her understand, to guide her toward being better. She attended every session, read every book they recommended, and slowly began to grasp the depth of the problem she'd been part of. 3 weeks after the incident, Patricia wrote a letter. Not to Tyler or his mother, she understood they owed her nothing, but to the local newspaper. In it, she detailed what she'd done, took full responsibility, and described the journey she was on to address her own bias. She ended with a challenge to others. If you've ever clutched your purse tighter, crossed the street, or made assumptions based on someone's appearance, examine why. Don't make excuses. Don't defend yourself. Just sit with the discomfort and ask yourself honestly where those reactions come from. Then do the work to change. The letter was published, and while some people praised her for it, others remained skeptical. Actions mattered more than words, they said. And they were right. But for Director Mitchell, reading that letter in her office one morning, it represented something. Not forgiveness, that wasn't hers to give. But maybe, just maybe, it represented hope that people could change, that conversations could lead to understanding. That one terrible afternoon in a parking lot could become a turning point. 6 months had passed since that afternoon in the parking lot, and the world looked different now. Not completely changed, but different enough that people noticed. Tyler sat in his bedroom working on college applications. The essay prompt stared back at him from his laptop screen. Describe a challenge you faced and how it shaped you. He'd rewritten it 3 times already, trying to find the right words to explain what happened without sounding bitter or defeated, because he wasn't defeated. If anything, he'd discovered a strength in himself he didn't know existed.